Hi everyone, welcome to our Careers Insight alumni panel for English, Drama, Classics and Film Studies. During this panel today, you will hear our University of Exeter alumni guests discuss their degree experiences and their career journeys as I ask them initial questions. There will also be a very brief presentation partway through in which we take a look at the many pathways that these degree subjects can lead to. You will have the opportunity to gain tips and advice from our speakers, as well as to ask them questions yourselves. Please post your questions in the chat box and we will do our absolute best to answer as many of them as we can. However, if you would prefer to ask your question anonymously, please send me a direct message in the chat and I will say your question on your behalf. I will now introduce our brilliant panelists who have joined us today.
My name is Ayan. I studied English at Exeter and I'm a TV producer at Ricochet Television.
I'm Kath. I'm a theatre director and performer for most of my career, although I now do lots of other things, but that's mainly what I've done in the last 25 years.
I studied film studies and Spanish, and I am a television production executive at ATP Media.
Hello, I'm John. I studied drama when I was at Exeter and I work as a freelance playwright and theatre director. I'm also the literary associate at Theatre Royal Plymouth and do little bits of teaching.
I'm Yasmin. I studied English with study abroad at Exeter and I'm currently a policy and parliamentary officer at the National Autistic Society.
I'm Katie. I studied classics at Exeter and now I work in academic publishing as an editorial services specialist at Cambridge University Press.
I'm Josh. I studied English at Exeter. Right now I'm working as a photojournalist slash documentary photographer. I'm mainly working now for National Geographic and the National Geographic Society through its Explorers program.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. Okay, so the first question that I have is, what inspired you to get into the subject that you ended up studying, or subjects you ended up studying at university? And also, as a bit of a second part to this, if relevant, were you torn between more than one subject when you were deciding what you wanted to study, or were you always sure it was exactly what you wanted to do?
So I did classics at Exeter. I didn't know what I wanted to do at first. My A-level subjects I did were English Lit, History and Latin, which I'd chosen because they were the ones I enjoyed the most and also ones that I was good at. So really my aim was to choose a subject at uni that I really enjoyed. I think that's really important. If you're going to spend 3 years studying it, you want to enjoy doing it. So I looked at English and I looked at history, but I went for classics because really it combined all of those things. With classics, you do language, but you also do literature and history and philosophy and anthropology, and you get to do loads of things in one. And that's really what drew me to classics. And I think I also liked that it was something a little bit unusual. Lots of people do English and history, and I liked that classics was a bit different. And that really does help because it stands out in your CV and employers always ask about it, which is good. So that's, yeah, what drew me to classics.
So I was actually torn like in half between some subjects when I applied to Exeter. So I studied for my A-levels psychology, English Lit and Lang, French, and I did a performance studies AS. So I was just a bit of a kind of like jack of all trades person, and I just hated that I had to pick one thing to study. So I was looking at psychology and English courses, and at one point I was going to do combined psychology and English. And I think the thing that tipped it for me in the end was that the parts of psychology I liked the most was just understanding people that are different and why they're different and trying to kind of learn more about that. It's something I could do within literature. So I just took that interest and like put it into the degree that I ended up choosing in the end. I could have gone the other way and done psychology, which is an equally interesting degree, but I think there's nothing wrong with having multiple interests. I guess just thinking about what is maybe the common thread that pulls them all together. Maybe it is that you do two subjects, but maybe it is like for me, taking that interest and running with it in the degree that you go with in the end.
So I studied English literature, psychology and Spanish at college, and I always knew I wanted to do a language, but I wanted to do study something else that could potentially complement my career path, which I always wanted to get into television production. So that's where film studies came in. I actually did try and I was torn between English and film studies. I just thought that film studies probably afforded me a little more opportunity to have direct experience go down, and so that's why I chose that side of it. And the ability to be able to make films and study films all around the world is definitely something that actually has come into use useful for my career.
So I think I knew really clearly, sort of coming through GCSE and A-level, that I wanted to do something theatre related. As lots of people do, I think I also had, I'm going to use the word for myself, not for anybody else, delusions of being an actor, and sort of running straight into that pathway. But when I was looking at courses for university, there were acting ones that I applied for, and a mix of drama courses, because alongside that sort of thing, I had been writing and developing my writing as well. And so when it came to selecting the course, it felt like that was a good and sensible way to open up both of those possibilities, to have a world where I could explore both of those things, and some of the sort of the wider context around the subject. And actually the story of the degree was that I started wanting to be an actor, and then came out wanting to write and a little bit sort of direct and work on new plays. And that was because of the sort of the diversity that I was able to explore in the course of the degree program.
Originally, I came from Indonesia, and I attended high school in Canada, and so I was looking through university options in the UK, and Exeter, was one of them. But in terms of what inspired me to study my degree, I wanted to be a writer originally, and that was and the decision to take English literature. It was from my tutor at high school, because I wanted to get into journalism, but then he kind of told me, why don't you focus on strengthening your ability in the English language, rather than going and take like specific majors like creative writing or journalism, specific. So anyway, that's what led me to take English literature. And although most of the time, throughout my time in Exeter, I think I don't end up becoming a writer. So if you can't write, go take photos, and then if you can't take photos, then become an editor somewhere. But yeah, that was my story there.
When I started, you couldn't do drama. So in 86, 7, drama wasn't something you could do at A-level. So I wanted to and couldn't. I think you could do GCSE, but you couldn't do A-level, well, not at my college anyway. So I couldn't. So I did art subjects as A-level. I did English, art and music. I always knew that I wanted to do drama. It wasn't a lot of people don't have a lot of questions around that, and I never did. I always knew what I wanted to do, but I did also have a place at art school. So my dilemma was whether I did art school or whether I went to Exeter. So I always felt that art would be something that I would want to do just for pleasure as a hobby and not really study it. So that's what made me think that I would want to do drama as a degree. And then my parents at the time, they're not alive, but when they were alive, they were my dad was very keen that I didn't do just drama, as a lot of parents are worried about just single honors drama. So I did English, but not out of a choice. So it was more to do with my parents thinking I had something to fall back on. And in the end, I'm really glad I did do it, because I had a great time, and a much smaller group of students. There was only 12 of us at the time doing English and drama, and so it was a really special experience because of that. And I wanted to direct and I wanted to perform, but I never wanted really to act as a main thing. I just ended up falling into it because it was easier to act in my own stuff. And people asked me to do it, so I did it, but it wasn't something I wanted to do. It was more the fact that the Exeter, at the time, the Exeter audition process was really, really cool, and I really liked it. It was very, very cool and very practical and very out there, and yeah, I loved it.
When I was at sixth form, and choosing where to go for university, I was quite torn between English and politics for a while. So for A levels, I did English, lit, politics and history. And I was worried about potentially missing out on one of those subjects, depending on which one I ended up picking. And then, quite similar to the thinking that Katie mentioned, I just kind of thought about, well, what subjects am I going to get the most out of in terms of being able to bring in other subjects? And the way I thought about it was that it's probably unlikely I'll get to read really great novels in a politics degree, but if I study English, I can definitely draw on political knowledge and historical knowledge, particularly if I wanted to go down the route of specialising in literature that looks at contemporary fiction and fiction that responds to political changes, which is what I ended up doing and really focusing on in my degree. So that's what kind of swayed it for me in the end.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I agree. It is one of those degrees. I say this as I did English as well, which is you can tailor it very much to what you're really interested in, what you want to do, and I think that's the same across the board for all degrees. Is you can ultimately narrow it down to your passions and do what particularly interests you the most, depending on where your interests lie. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for your answers to that initial starter question. So the next question that I have is, what did you most enjoy about studying your degree subject?
So I think what I liked about classics was the variety. So you study language, but then I'd have a module in history and one in archaeology and one in philosophy. And so you were doing lots of things all at once, and I really liked that. I think also it was nice because classics isn't as big a subject. You get quite small class sizes as well, so you got to know everyone, and I made lots of friends I'm still friends with now, 10 years later. And that was really nice about classics as well. And I think also classics sets you up really well because you're not sort of pigeonholed into one career option. It leaves you with lots of options, classics. And it's a really good department at Exeter for classics. The professors I had, the tutors I had were all really, really good, really knowledgeable and helpful. And as we were saying about being able to tailor it, you're able to do that a lot in classics as well, to tailor it to your interests. So I was particularly interested in gender in the ancient world, and I took particular topics to do with gender and sexuality and women in the ancient world. And then my dissertation, I was able to tailor to that as well. So yeah, that's what I enjoyed about classics.
I think the thing I enjoyed about my degree is similar to actually Katie, because I studied at the Cornwall campus. So I was in Penryn for my degree, which is a really small department. So when I went there, you kind of know what the lecturers, what their interests are. So if your interests align with the kind of the staff interests, you're able to like really kind of draw on their knowledge and expertise, and that can help you kind of tailor your degree to what you want, and you know that you've got that support there. And because we were down in Cornwall, there was lots of really cool stuff about regional identity and British politics and things to do with like Cornishness that was super, super interesting. And then it led to me doing my dissertation on like English/human geography and how like living in these Celtic spaces like affects like how you see the world, which was like, I couldn't have done that in any other department anywhere else, I don't think. So that was amazing. I think the research expertise as well, like these people, they kind of are very passionate about the things that they write about. And when you go and see them in their office hours outside of your classes, you really get that sense of enthusiasm. It's infectious, really. That's why I just loved it. It just feels like a proper research community and everyone's involved, like the staff and the students. So it's much more like collaborative than I would imagine school is, where you're kind of being taught how to pass your A levels, which I really hated. So going to uni was like so refreshing. It's completely a different learning experience. And you're there because hopefully you want to get a job, but also, like we were saying, you're there because you love your subject, you love learning, and everybody around you does as well. And it's just, yeah, I guess that was my favorite part of the whole thing.
I think what I really loved about being at Exeter is that there was really a mix of experiences, both sort of within the degree itself and around it. So not only was I able to sort of do real specialist things around playwriting and directing that have sort of seeded lots of what I've done career-wise, but there was also the chance to do Shakespeare and much more sort of esoteric Eastern breathwork in performance, and look at more performance art kind of styles. So that sort of meant there was a real breadth of variety. But there were also lots of chances to collaborate sort of within the department as well. So there were shows run and directed by MA students that were part of their courses that we as undergraduates were able to be in. So it meant there was a really sort of varied experience that was really sort of hands-on and practical in lots of ways, but across lots of different sort of areas within the field. And that sort of, yeah, that was really enjoyable for the variety, but also the genuine collaboration with the other people who were, yeah, as other people have said, passionate about the subject.
Thanks, John. Charlotte?
For me, what I most enjoyed was that I did two very different subjects. For me, what I most enjoyed was that I did two very different subjects. So the variety for me was vast. And in particular, within film studies, you know, the modules on offer ranged from so many different cinemas around the world, theory behind film, the history of film. I had options from making a film to Latin American films, which obviously complemented the other side of my degree as well. And with the Spanish side, I was able to learn other dialects within Spain. I studied my year abroad in Barcelona, so I learnt Catalan. And the choice I just thought was great. There were so many different modules you could choose from, to the point where actually the decision was quite difficult sometimes, because there were so many that I wanted to learn and do. And the great thing with the languages is you can, in your spare time or evenings, you can learn another language as well. So just the variety for me was what I most enjoyed.
So yeah, quite similar to what other people have said, but I think for me, probably the flexibility is what I enjoyed most about English. There's such a breadth of modules to choose from that you can kind of really create your own path for yourself of going down a subject interest within English that you want to continue and to pick up. And even if you start your degree not necessarily knowing what area of English really, you know, you enjoy the most, you usually have worked that out by the end of your degree and by the time it comes to doing your dissertation, just because of the way you might have picked your modules as you go along. And I had a really great seminar tutor in my final year who really just encouraged me to get really specific and really think about honing in on my interests, and he ended up becoming my dissertation supervisor just because of how much he encouraged that. And yeah, so like for me, for example, I knew I really wanted to look at post-colonial work, and I ended up kind of focusing specifically on the immigrant experience in the UK, and just through some of the modules that were available, and that ended up becoming my final research project at the end of my degree. So yeah, I really enjoyed that opportunity, and probably liked that the most about the subjects.
It was mainly practice-based. So at the time, there were very few practice-based degrees in drama in like the late 80s, early 90s. Bristol was very academic. I had a place at Bristol. There were a couple of others, but they were quite boring and quite dry. Exeter was really, at the time, quite ahead of its time in the fact that it was the first practice-based degree you could do in the UK. So as soon as we got there, we had this bouncy floor, which I absolutely loved. I don't know if John remembers that. There was a bouncy floor. That was my favourite thing about my degree.
Okay. I love that answer. That's great. Josh.
All right. Well, first of all, I think coming to Exeter, you know, from Canada at the time, I had double language barrier. First being, I you know, I'm not used to the English accent. That's one, and English is not my first language. And I'm you know, at the beginning, especially, I struggled with some of the courses that's offered, but you know, I think I got better over time, and as I have support from my peers to kind of push through the years. But then things got more interesting. I think in my second and third year, when I think creative writing was one. Creative writing, it's about finding your voice. I think that, and I think that's key for me, especially at the time. I still kind of, you know, in the precipice whether I want to become a writer still, or do I want to do photography. But in the third year, I think it's really helpful modules such as Orientalism, or like Yasmin said, you know, post-colonialism as well, postmodernism, and that's kind of, you know, get my mind thinking about my own practice in photography. And also, you know, I should have said earlier that, you know, if I were to turn back time, then I would probably go and have film studies as well. But I think what I love most about Exeter is the societies. I think Emma in the chat panel is asking, is like, were you involved in any clubs outside of uni? Well, I mean, you know, so the societies in Exeter are, you know, kind of part of the university still. So I work as a photographer for the Expose campus newspaper. I collaborated with all of the student theater societies, you know, in production. And later on, that really helped me in terms of, you know, getting forward and getting internships, you know, by really, you know, utilizing my time with the societies. Yeah, that's what I remember the best about Exeter.
Thank you so much. Those are great answers, and it's great to hear more about your experiences. Some great questions are coming in the chat as well. So to those of you watching, keep them coming in, and we will do our best to answer them very soon after I've asked a couple more questions, and then we will go on to student questions. So yeah, thank you to those of you who've posted so far. They're great questions. So the next one that I have is, can you tell us about your career journey since graduating, and what is your current role? Tell us a bit more about your current role.
I graduated in 2009. I landed my first role at the BBC in the comedy and entertainment department in that same summer of graduating. So in television production, everyone starts at the bottom, which is a little bit thankless. So I spent 2 years at the BBC working in different areas, different departments, before deciding that I would like to go down the production management side of television rather than the sort of more creative side. So I followed that path. I left the BBC. I worked for several different production companies. I worked on shows such as Strictly Come Dancing, X Factor, Leaf, Total Wipeout, for anyone that remembers that. Made in Chelsea, lots of different programs across different genres. But deep down, I knew that my passion lay in sports production. And sorry, it says my internet's stable. I hope you can still hear me. Unstable, sorry. So I managed to secure a role as production coordinator at the time for the ATP, who I still work for. So I work for the professional body of men's tennis. And I'm currently in Miami working on the Miami Open, hence my very glamorous background. And I worked my way up, and I'm now the production executive and part of the senior management team, managing all the television production of our 46 events around the world on the men's tour.
Mine doesn't sound so glamorous. I'm not in Miami. When I was your age, I had no idea what I wanted to do. When I left university, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. so it's taken me a while to find the job that I really wanted. So when I left uni, I just focused on what my strengths were, what my skills were, and what I enjoyed. And I knew I enjoyed writing and editing and that kind of thing. So I looked for jobs that involved that, and I ended up in magazine publishing. So I started as an editorial assistant, which was a great first job because I got to be involved in everything. I got to write for the magazine, editing and proofreading, involved with the photography, the website, the social media, everything. I worked my way up there to deputy editor, but it wasn't my calling. I was still trying to find that. So I moved from there into communications and PR for a charity, which again was drawing on my writing and my communication skills. That wasn't right for me either. At that stage, when I was looking for jobs, a lot of the kind of jobs I was looking at then really wanted you to have a master's degree. So I went back to university and did a master's degree, which I actually did in gender studies, partly because it was something that was really interesting to me, but also it's something that I'd really focused on in my classics degree as well, so that made sense. And I worked as a freelance writer and editor at the same time as I was doing that, and realised during that how much I enjoyed academia. And so from there, I ended up going into academic publishing. So it was drawing on my magazine publishing skills that I had, but I now work for Cambridge University Press, so working on academic books and journals, all the kinds of things you'll be reading when you go to university. And my role essentially is I assure the editorial quality of all our books and journals, making sure they're all up to scratch. I look at manuscripts when they come in, check if there are any potential issues, that kind of thing. And for me, it's perfect because it draws on my skills and my strengths. But unlike magazine publishing, where I wasn't that into magazines, here I get to work on academic texts, which I'm really passionate about. I get to work on brand new emerging research. I get to work across all the subjects. So sometimes I'm reading classics texts, sometimes they're law, medicine, history, biology, anything. So I'm constantly learning and reading new things. And it's really interesting. And they were very interested that I'd done a classics degree because that's quite a niche subject that was useful to have on the team. And obviously it being quite an essay heavy subject, I'd really honed my writing, my editing skills whilst I was at university as well, which really helped as well. So now I'm in the career I like, but it took a little while. So don't worry if you don't know what you wanted to do. It took me a while, but I got there. So yeah.
Similar again to Katie, like I did like a 2-year meandering around before I ended up in the career that I'm in now. So I think even graduating now, looking for a job now is really hard. But when I left, I just thought about all the skills that I had. So for me, it was research. It was being able to like read like quite dense information and quickly understand like the key ideas and stuff and communicate that to an audience. So kind of teaching-y kind of skills, but everyone always says to English guys, oh, you're going to be a teacher. So I kind of fought very hard against that. So instead I did a bit of sales, door-to-door sales while I was just like in the summer when I left. Hated it after 3 months. So then I was applying for tutoring jobs. And then I ended up working for a science communications company. So we go into primary schools and we teach like little kids from 5 to 11 all about science and get them to love science. So even though I didn't have a science degree, it was learning something and then explaining it to an audience and making sure that they understood. So I did that for about 2 years. And then I was applying for all sorts of other kind of jobs that were full-time and actually paid me enough money to eat. And I applied for things like charities and after-school homework clubs and insurance schemes. And I applied for everything that I kind of had the skills to do. And then I ended up throwing my hat in the ring for a TV kind of production training scheme, which I managed to get myself on. And then from there, after 2 years of, just doing jobs here and there to try and make ends meet, I had this like year-long job contract, and that really helped me get my foot in the door. In TV, I got to like learn the ropes in a supported way, and then kind of left that job and then have been working for other production companies ever since. So now I'm a producer. So what that means is I have responsibility for like developing ideas for TV and then writing out what they're going to look like, going out to film them, like direct to crew. And then I get to see them go out on television, which is so amazing and very, very rewarding work. But again, like, it's okay if you don't know what you want to do. I guess just think about what you enjoy and what you're good at. And I think everything else will fall into place eventually.
Straight after I finished my study, so kind of in that weird limbo period between finishing off your studies and waiting to graduate, I did an internship with my local MP back home just to build up some political experience. I'd done a bit of volunteering and stuff like that at uni, but I knew that something to do with politics was what I was interested in. So that was just to build up a bit of experience. And then my first full-time job out of uni was actually working for a small charitable kind of social enterprise that I'd actually volunteered with when I was at Exeter. So it was an organisation that had been set up by a previous Exeter student, had a partnership with the uni, and I'd been a volunteer with them. And yeah, so that was really nice because it was something that I'd done at uni that ended up directly leading to my first job. And it was focused on improving social mobility and university access for students, including going on to unis like Exeter. So it was, yeah, really rewarding. After that, I moved to working in PR and public affairs at a communications agency, basically, in Westminster. And then that led quite nicely onto my current role now, where I work at one of the country's biggest disability charities. So it's the biggest charity for autistic people. And I still work in kind of public affairs and parliamentary work, but also policy work. And rather than working at the agency where I was kind of working on behalf of clients, I now do this solely for my charity, like on behalf of our charity. And my policy area focuses specifically on social care and physical health, and basically involves a lot of reading through very dense text or writing it myself, responding to policy consultations, but also helping the government by advising on policy decisions. And for example, throughout the pandemic, that's included things like securing exemptions for autistic people from face masks and limits on exercising outside. So it's been really rewarding work, even when forced to stay at home for the whole year. But yeah, it's something that's really allowed me to see kind of tangible changes and in the things I work on every day. So yeah, I think that's something that happens a lot in the charity sector. So that's kind of my journey.
I knew that I wanted to make my own work pretty much all the way through the degree, definitely in the third year. I kind of focused, like a lot of us are saying, we focused down on exactly what we were interested in the third year. Mine was that the idea of creativity being a sense of whole, so not just specific. I wasn't particularly interested in text even then. So I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in the idea of community, and I was very interested in the idea of the visual arts and how that, and sound worlds, and how that is used generally in arts or creativity generally. And it just happened to be that theatre was what I was going into. And so I had when I say I was interested in community, Exeter was very connected to various different theatre companies at the time. Knee High, you may have heard of if anyone wants to do drama, very famous theatre company, and various other companies. And I got to perform with companies whilst I was still a student, which was quite unusual, but it meant that I did a lot of rural touring around the villages in Devon, and that sort of made me realise that I wanted to do something small scale. I didn't really want to, I was more interested in the small scale, I mean that in inverted commas. So when I left, I knew I wanted to make my own work, but in a really kind of intense, small way, and which is good because I didn't have much opportunity to do it in a large way. But so I was able to get money to make my own work, which was very unusual at the time. But I had managed to work for the National Theatre and for another very big company, just through somebody I knew who was very famous, well, not famous, she is now, but very, very successful actress. And unfortunately, it was just one of those things about who you know. And I managed to get some work doing a lot of education, theatre and education, which I really loved, and managed to get my track record up a little bit in terms of my CV, and was then able to apply for money for my own work within a couple of years. So I graduated in 93, 4, I think, and I did my first show in 97. So between then I'd worked for the National Theatre, and I toured and done education work and kind of worked out what I really wanted to say by using lots of groups of young people, which really helped. And then, yeah, then I ran a company called Platform 4 for 25 years and didn't really stop. So that's what I did.
All right. Well, right after uni, I think I applied for masters for my graduate studies in photojournalism and documentary photography in London. So I knew that was going to be my last year in England, because the government's going to kick me out, deported back to Indonesia. Kidding. But anyway, so anyway, during that graduate studies, we had to develop like a our thesis project, and my thesis project was on documenting the Asmat the Asmat people. It's an indigenous group in West Papua in Indonesia. So this is like way off from English degree that I had taken. But right after my master's, I went to work as staff at the Asmat Museum, the local Asmat Museum in Papua, for about a year, and that 1 year was basically 3 years on and off, coming back and forth. And the decision to become museum staff is not because I have any museology kind of background, but because that's one way as a photojournalist that I could work in the area. Whereas, this area is largely inaccessible to foreign journalists. So I had kind of, became a daily witness, I suppose, to whatever's going on in Asmat. And then I left in 2016 for family reasons. So I came back to Jakarta and work my way, become as a freelance photographer. But it was only, I think, in 2019 that I started working with National Geographic. I got in touch, and for example, Asmat or West Papua has not been published in National Geographic since '96. So I got in touch with the right directors and submitted my pictures. But then I think I got my first assignment from Nat Geo. I think June 2019. That was the first time. But I kept going. I kept working for them. Kept getting published. And I think it was last month that I was awarded the National Geographic Society Exploration Grant. So that grant would kind of support me going back to Asmat, continue the work for about a year, which is I'm particularly grateful for. But I think obviously this speaks to, I suppose to the arts industry in general, because like a lot of us seems to survive from grants or try to build up something from those grants. Especially if you think about photojournalism, if any of you guys ever think about doing photography, I mean, in terms of finance, we're pretty much depleted. I mean, National Geographic, New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, those are the kind of big dogs that that you can actually get pretty serious money from, if we're talking about money here. And newspapers, they rely on wire photographers. But anyway, the idea is not to work necessarily for like a specific media organization. I think it's important to, at least for me as a photographer, to kind of develop, you know, independent projects and kind of build an architecture, a building block towards that project, and try to link it up. You know, like for example, like my ASMAT work, I often collaborate with people in anthropology or in museology because ASMAT artwork are exhibited, you know, in museums, I mean, Europe or America. So that gives for me as a photographer, that gives like a, you know, kind of an overall stronger outlook into it, rather than being a photographer that you know, take photo, publish, and then go off to the next subjects or the next projects rather.
So again, a little bit of a wandering path, I guess, by virtue of the area that I wanted to go into. So I knew when I finished my degree that I particularly wanted to focus on playwriting and on the development of new plays, and that meant, in fact, that I stayed on at Exeter to do, I don't think it exists in the same way now, but the MA in playwriting and script development, which was great because that sort of felt like it gave me a permission card for a year to go, no, this is what I do, and this is what I'm a specialist in, and to be in rooms and have conversations with people on those sort of terms. And that meant that I was sort of able to connect with a number of people that were interested in that work in the Southwest in a way that has been very useful in the years since. The sort of the networking sort of access through the companies that were associated with Exeter and the staff that were associated at Exeter for my undergrad and MA have been useful in building jobs that I'm doing now. The job I'm currently doing for Theatre Royal Plymouth came from meeting David Prescott, the former artistic associate there, years ago when I was a student in a sort of a conference that was taking place within the department. So that was sort of good. So I knew I wanted to develop work in that vein, both my own work and sort of working with other people. And so that meant that I was able to go and do that kind of work at a small level for a number of sort of theatres, doing workshops and development with writers for places like Salisbury Playhouse, Salisbury Arts Centre, and Tobacco Factory Theatre in Bristol. And then there was another side of my life, which was partially motivated by paying the bills, but also because I'd started doing lots of workshops with young people, and the sort of the range of stuff that I'd covered in the time of my degree meant that I had a reasonable sort of practical skill set for actor training and clowning and sort of writing and making stuff. And so there's been these two tracks of working with young people in a sort of a teaching context and developing and sort of building up new writing. And I've done that in various ways for different companies and organizations as time has gone on, and been able to sort of strengthen and develop that work through directing youth theatre groups and their shows, and sort of running artist development stuff for playwrights in a few different contexts. So that now half of my work at the moment is working with writers for Theatre Royal Plymouth, but also through my company Downstage Right, that sort of was about identifying a gap of provision for developing writers in Devon and Cornwall, which we try in our little way to fill. And another side of things, which is working with young people and teaching, which means I am currently sat, I'm sorry to say, in a rival institution where I am a part-time lecturer. But that's come out of the sort of the teaching work that I've developed and the skill set. And indeed, if I could show you the bookshelf over there, the books acquired during my degree that are still being taken off the shelf and used now. And so I have this nice sort of mixed career that balances those two things, and has been quite COVID resilient as well, because I've been able to continue the teaching while lots of other theatrical dreams died in the last year and are only just starting to reform.
Absolutely, it's the year of rebuilding, especially in the arts right now. Before we carry on with questions, I'm just going to share something with those of you in attendance very quickly before we carry on with questions. Which is based on something I'm going to ask. So just bear with me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. So something we've been talking about is the idea that there are lots of different pathways that you can go on through programs such as English, drama, classics, and film studies. And because we've been talking to a brilliant panel who've all come from any of these subjects, but have all gone down such different pathways from each other, and it's been fantastic to hear about their experiences. And this is just to remind you that with these subjects, there are so many transferable skills that you pick up from these degrees that can lead to a huge range of careers, For instance, you can gain excellent written, oratory, practical and communication skills, the ability to research, source and examine information, intellectual independence and autonomy in projecting your own opinions and views, gaining a writing voice, working collaboratively as part of a team on projects and discussing ideas in groups. This comes across all of these different subjects. A flexible and open-minded approach to work. Evaluation skills, the ability to interpret and explain complex information clearly, critical reasoning, analytical skills, the ability to tailor your writing to suit different audiences, again, finding your own voice, finding a very resourceful and creative approach to work. You learn time management, self-management, organization, meeting deadlines, articulating knowledge, understanding of text, concepts, theories, conveying your arguments and opinions, thinking creatively, using your judgment to weigh up different perspectives, as well as negotiation and conflict management skills that a lot of the time you gain, particularly in group work, I find. And we've been hearing different examples from our panelists, but these are other examples of careers that some of our alumni have gone into following degrees in English, drama, classics, and/or film studies. So I'll just give a handful of examples. You've got TV and film consultant, editor, screenwriter, online content writer, journalist, media executive, foreign language teacher, drama teacher, underwriter, media sales executive, actor, business development manager. So many different pathways some of our alumni have gone into. And also as well, employer destinations as well. So we've got alumni who work at the Birmingham Rep or the Odeon or Penguin Random House, the Navy, Mary Rose Trust, BBC, Mediacom, Waterstones, Nationwide Building Society, Tatler Magazine, ITN, English Heritage. There's just so many different places that alumni have gone down. So what we're just trying to say is that ultimately we would recommend, when it comes to choosing a degree, because I know some of you, well, most of you in attendance are still thinking about what you want to do, whether you want to go to university, what subjects you want to do. And what we would advise is choose something that you love to do, because you'll be spending several years, you'll be spending 3 or 4 or more years, depending on whether you go into extra study or further study, or if you go on a year abroad or do a program that has a placement year. You may as well spend time doing something that you really enjoy, because there are so many skills that you gain. And as I said earlier on, you also gain subject-specific skills as well, but you gain a lot of transferable skills that employers really love, that will look great on a CV. But also as well, not only that employers love, but also that help you, that support you in what you decide to do in your career, that you learn things at university that will make a difference to what you go on to do later in life. So this is just something to consider to those of you who are just thinking very much about what you want to do. And we hope that this helps you give an idea. I was just going to say, for the panelists, are there any transferable skills that you think you gained from your degree that have been really useful in your career?
When you start in TV, the roles go kind of runner, if you're going into the creative side, runner, and then researcher, and then kind of move up to producer. So when I was a researcher, I used to say I can find, you know, people, places and facts, you know, wherever they are, whenever you need them, I just know where to get them. So it's kind of knowing where to look for something, as well as like what to make of it when you found that source, and knowing like what's a good source and a bad source. I mean, today, even in media, there's all this stuff about fake news and trust and accountability. So it's really, really important to kind of be able to read critically and know what is a trusted source and what's not a trusted source. And that's something that, being in an academic environment, really helps you to hone those skills, and you have people that have those skills that can help guide your learning in that way, which I think is super important, even to this day in my job.
I'd say definitely my analytical skills have really helped me. I know that's one that people mention a lot with English, but it really has helped, especially with policy work. Like I said earlier, it often means just trying to make sense of big expanses of text from government, from other organisations, and I often approach them like I would have done with a text when I was at uni. And I think also doing my degree really helped me to gain confidence in my own writing. I think you mentioned it in your presentation, Melissa, but like kind of developing your own writing voice, and that's also helped me to really understand how to bring my own voice to organisations' writing and work. So yeah, and definitely my final year in particular, I focused on texts that kind of responded to the ongoing and immediate cultural and political climate, and yeah, doing parliamentary work in my role right now, just kind of, that's something that's continued that interest in current affairs and making sense of it, has definitely helped.
I totally agree with the others. Any of these degrees are really going to help you with your critical thinking and your analytical skills. I think one thing also that you really develop is your organizational skills, time management, being able to prioritize, meet deadlines. Certainly all the jobs I've had to juggle multiple things at once, especially in publishing. You have really tight deadlines all the time, and that really set me up well for that. And it's also something I remember talking about in job interviews when I first left university, about how my degree had really set me up well for that, and that went down well in interviews. And certainly thinking of all the transferable skills that you have gained and really spelling out to employers that you've got them really, really does help when you're trying to find a job.
So I agree with everything that's been said so far. All of those things have helped me as well. But just to add to that, for me, I pride myself on my communication skills, both written and oral communication skills, and my confidence in that. So in my job, I'm the opposite side of television production to Ian, and I have to talk to every department. I'm the go-to person, so I'm often speaking to someone that could be CEO level or players on site at an event, right down to our entry-level employees. And I think that my degree really helped with my confidence, because not only was I obviously learning to communicate in another language, but also the vast amount of sort of group discussion work, presentations in front of your fellow students, project management as well, all really serves to improve your confidence in communication in particular. And that, I think, really helped me to have those skills in my career.
This is just echoing things that other people have said, but I think the sort of those research skills of being able to find sources and distill information and bring those sort of together has really been something that I'm not sure I necessarily would have taken away as a key skill set, but which is something that I have used regularly, both in my work with writers, I suppose, but when I've worked on other projects. So I've done quite a bit of work for the heritage sector, writing plays for the Box, Plymouth Museum as it is now, and a few other heritage organisations recently. And so I've had to sort of apply those research skills and sort of presentation skills on the basis of that research to those jobs. You know, I've found myself in the strange position of giving talks about Plymouth history to historians in Plymouth, even though that is not my field or background, although it's an interest of mine. But that really comes from those sort of research and presentation skills that I've developed during that time. And I guess the other thing is a sense of like project creating and running a project and collaborating with others in order to achieve that. That works in the more explicit sort of drama work that I do, but also in some of the community work that I've done, some of the work around sort of environmental campaigning that I've also done. All of those sorts of skills of bringing people together and running a project to a specific aim, you know, really harks back and has a root in the group collaborative projects that we did as part of the degree.
I would sort of agree, definitely. I think the only thing I would add is that when I was at university, we had a real kind of slightly thinking out of the box, I hate that phrase, ethos, where, you know, it wasn't traditional, my course and my experience at all. It attracted lots of very diverse, very different kinds of people. So obviously that helped in the sense that you were kind of having to collaborate, but at the same time, it was really great about making you feel like you could do it on your own if you needed to. I'm not sure if that's the same anymore, but certainly when I graduated, and it was partly me, but also partly the course, which was this feeling that you could it was quite entrepreneurial. So you had this feeling that you could start and do something on your own and really set up businesses from scratch. And by that, I mean any kind of thing. You could work out how the system worked. You could try and make it work for yourself. And that sense of autonomy, which is very, very hard to have when you first graduate, because you just feel lost, was definitely there. And a few of us ended up a lot of us ended up as self-employed. And I think that self-employment, that slightly anarchic spirit is very important from drama at Exeter. John's nodding.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kath. I'm just going to go on to a few questions in the chat before I come on to final ones. A question that has come in is, there's been talk of creating networks and links which have opened doors to job opportunities. Did you have to create these networks by yourself, or did the university help you build them too?
Yeah, that is an incredibly incisive, interesting question, whoever just asked that. Well done. Yeah, you nailed it. Basically, all careers are about that, really. They're about lots of other things as well, but they are enormously about who you know. And it's completely disingenuous to say that it's not, certainly in the arts. So it's about working out how you can be as tenacious as possible to try and get what you need. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. I don't mean like you're just kind of manipulating people for the sake of it, but it's just about being really clever about how you think about what you want and how you make those relationships and make those connections. Really, that's a better way of saying it, really. So the sense of understanding, especially when you're young and you've just left uni, and even whilst you're at university, it still starts there. The sense of understanding where you fit and how you fit into a career which within it has already 50, 100 million micro careers within it. I mean, just within drama, there are thousands and thousands of different genres of work and thousands of different little niche worlds within that. It's like, you know, think of science fiction story and you've got planets within planets within planets. Well, that's what it's like with careers. It's not just one career and you go, oh, that's it, I'm going to be an agent. Then there's what kind of agent are you going to be, you know? So there are lots of questions to ask, and I think that that's why it's so important that you do develop those that you develop a broader awareness of how you might fit into this ecology, because that's what it is. But when you sort of know what you want vaguely in a career, that's fantastic, but then you need to work out where you think you sit within that, and that really is the art of it all, if you like. I hope that helps.
I think when people, like especially young students, because I was quite a shy person at school, you hear the word networking, you just kind of want to like cover your head and scream. It sounds really scary. And something I always say to people is, it's just making sure that you're putting yourself as much as possible in the same rooms with people that are doing what you want to do. and really practical ways that kind of I figured out how to do this, because I didn't know anyone in TV when I started. I had to go on Twitter and I had to follow like people that are my age that are kind of doing things I want to do. I just needed to follow all the production companies. You just need to know what's going on. So for me, Twitter lists are like quite a practical way to do that, or whatever career you want to go into. They always say for your personal statement, are you reading like the industry papers? Are you reading National Geographic? Are you reading The Economist? If you speak to somebody that you want to get advice from, can you like contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way? So if you know what you're talking about, the half the battle's you've already won it, as far as I'm concerned. And if you're someone that's coming up to me and you want to work in telly and you already know what your favorite shows are, and I can tell that you're someone that has thought about how TV's made and what you like, I'm gonna want to talk to you more. I'm gonna want to help you. I'm gonna want to give you that kind of foot in the door. So it doesn't need to be terrifying. Yes, of course it's who you know, but that doesn't need to mean that, you know, we need to resign before we've even kind of given it our best shot. So it's scary, but, you know, it can be done. And this is from someone who's like quite a shy person. So I hope you believe me when I give you that good advice.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think there are many shy and or quiet people in the in the arts industries, to be honest. And yeah, it can seem a scary prospect to network. But it's also so rewarding and exciting when you do.
I just wanted to add from the other side, I haven't got any of my jobs from knowing someone in the industry or at the company or anything like that. So you don't need to know people to get into certain careers. I've always just applied without knowing anyone and got through because of, you know, my interview and my experience and my skills and that kind of thing. So, because I know that can be a worry for some young people, that obviously some people do get helped by knowing people and they say who it's about, who you know, but it's not always, so don't worry about that. But once you're in a company, obviously networking within that is great to do, especially if you want to work your way up the company. You want to make sure you're networking with people and know people who might want to promote you and that kind of thing. But yeah, just to let you know, it's not something to worry about. You don't have to know people to get far in a career you want to go into.
Just to share, I think when I attended my graduate studies, that particular year was basically being used for me to network as much as possible, because I knew as soon as I leave the UK, then I would be pretty much out of touch with, you know, people in the Western Hemisphere. So I used that particular year to network as much as I can, and for me, you know, that meant, you know, I don't want to brag here, but I got a couple of portfolio reviews up in New York and that kind of thing, you know, and get in touch with people who are influential in the industry, because I knew, but as soon as I get back to Indonesia, if there's any international students here, as soon as I get back to my own country, then it would be kind of difficult unless, like, we, you know, unless we've met them, or unless we have met that particular person and engaged in, you know, start a conversation on where you're going. Yeah, but, you know, yes, it's not always about who you know, but I think the main thing I would say is all about your work. If you do good work, then I think people will eventually find you. And, you know, the simplest example is like how I got to know Melissa here, you know, because I was doing other theater productions, and, you know, Ellie picked me up. Ellie was the artistic director for this, for her theater company. So she, yeah, so anyway, she somehow found me and you know, got me on board. But anyway, yeah, as long as we, you know, as long as we could do good work, and people will notice eventually. It's not, yeah, although obviously, you know, who you know matters as well. And also, the one important key thing is to maintain contact, you know, because when I went to West Papua, then obviously there was no internet. There's no regular internet, but you know, sometimes it's a challenge for everybody to, you know, keep in touch with everyone, people we know. But we should definitely make a system or an effort, strategy to always be in touch with all those people. Yeah, because they could be, you know, the main difference when you when you want to get ahead on your next career journey. I think it's also important that we have mentors. It's always, you know, if there's somebody influential in the industry, any industry, photography, journalism, if we have mentor that could, you know, push your career, I think that, yeah, that's really helpful.
Thank you so much. They were all fantastic answers. A question came in specifically for Charlotte, which was a question saying that this person is thinking of studying Spanish and English literature, and do you think your course offered a good mix of the two subjects? And what sort of things did you get to mix in film and Spanish?
Great question. So my subjects were separate. So you get to choose modules in both film studies and Spanish, and it's very much 50-50. And there were subjects that went between the both. So in Spanish, I could choose Spanish film, Spanish literature, Spanish history, you know, along those lines. And then in film studies, there were also options like Latin American film and Spanish film as well. So there was quite a lot of crossover, which was great. But actually, there was distinct differences between the two as well. And that's what I enjoyed the most. I think I said that earlier about my degree, was the choice that doing two subjects afforded me. And then during your year abroad, it's very much all about the language. So I didn't do anything to do with my film studies side of my degree in my third year in Barcelona. It was 100% just the language side. And then when you come back in your fourth year, it's back to the 50-50 element of modules across the two subjects. But I did try to choose a couple of modules that complemented both subjects, which I found that was also slightly easier because it kind of placed your skill set better. I hope I've answered that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming very shortly to the end of the panel. We haven't got that much time left, but there is such an interesting question in the chat, and also I've got a final question as well. So just a couple more, but this is quite an interesting one. So maybe it's a bit of a text recommendation. So maybe a bit of an in a nutshell wrap up to this question. Were there any specific texts from your degrees that you feel impacted your career choices later down the line?
Well, I don't know if you're looking specifically for academic texts or novels, for example, if any of us have done English, but
I think either or.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to mention a novel actually. When I was kind of doing my dissertation and looking at my final big research projects at the end of near the end of my fourth year, I kind of focused on the author Zadie Smith, and she's from my hometown, writes very well about London and growing up in London and what that's like. And I don't think I'd ever really I'd talked about it a lot in my degree, but that was really like what kind of made me appreciate the link that you can make between English literature and what's going on around you, and how books can respond to changing cultural shifts, in this case things like multiculturalism and diversity in places like London. And it just made me start thinking about so many things, just as topics, as ideas, all from that novel. And I think that's where I started really thinking about, oh well, it's, you know, you don't have to do maybe something specifically related to English, but because clearly you're really interested in politics and culture and everything about people's surroundings and potentially trying to change that. So you don't have to become an English teacher, for example. You can do a job that really speaks to those kind of topics and those things. So that's probably kind of marked a bit of a shift for me when I was at uni, because I originally had no idea what I wanted to do after uni. So that probably helped.
what advice would you give to anyone who is considering studying your degree subject, and what tips would you offer for anyone wishing to go into the field that you currently work in?
For classics, I think the biggest thing is just to read around the subject, get yourself more familiar with the ancient world, read some of the big ancient writers, Homer, Virgil, Ovid, that kind of thing, in translation. Don't bother reading them in Latin or Greek. And if you're going to be learning a new language at university, familiarising yourself with a little bit beforehand, getting to grips with some of the basics. I learned ancient Greek from scratch when I got to university, and that was quite overwhelming, especially it being a different alphabet and everything. So that's definitely something I'd recommend. For getting into publishing, one of the biggest things I'd recommend is really taking advantage of the extracurriculars at university. I was on the committee for the university's arts magazine. I also wrote stuff for the university's newspaper, and those were both things that then looked really good because it showed that I had a passion for writing and publishing. And I was part of the Classic Society and all sorts, because I think so many people have degrees now. Employers want to see more than that. They want to see what you've done outside of that as well. And that really helped me. And for book publishing, make sure you read a lot of books because obviously they want to see your interest in that as well. Hopefully that helps.
Any advice for what I studied? Well, it's fantastic to learn a language at university, and the year abroad is an incredible opportunity. You know, I was 20 when I went to live in Barcelona for a year, having never lived out the country, with a language that I was not yet fluent in. It's a cultural change. It's very daunting, but it is a wonderful experience. So I would recommend anyone thinking about learning a language, do it, because it's great, and also it affords you a wide range of careers. You know, for me and mine, in television production, I'm lucky because that, you know, doesn't seem to be a wide choice of people that actually speak other languages. So it really helped me with things like working around the world. And with the film studies parts, I think that you just, as has been said before, it's doing something that you love and that you enjoy. So if it's that you're interested in, you know, it's just a great subject to study, and something that is very interesting. You know, I got to sort of watch a hell of a lot of films for my degree, which is something that I found great. It was fun. It was a lot better than, I also had to read a lot of books, but it was sort of not as heavy as having to go through a lot of texts. And advice of getting into television production, if that's something that interests you, first and foremost, I know that it's very competitive. A lot of people think it's a very glamorous job. It's far from glamorous. And as you might be able to tell by my surroundings here, it's very hard work. It's really long hours. So it's something that, you know, I think that a lot of people sort of think it's fun to get into, and it is. I love my job. And I think Ian touched on it earlier. It's following production companies on social media. It's looking up the specific television production jobs boards, because we don't often advertise on your standard LinkedIn and such like. And I got my first role by walking into a television studio and handing over my CV at the reception. So I think in TV production, it's sort of trying to stand out in different ways. And then once you get your foot in the door, it's creating your network within and moving on from job to job, because obviously a lot of work is freelance.
Yeah, I guess on what Charlotte said, yeah, TV is a very hard industry to get into and stay into. So you have to love it. And I guess it's the same for your degree as well. So for English, I just remember, like, I just loved to read. I just loved to know what makes a story tick, and all the different things you can do with literature. So that really came across in my personal statement when I was applying to universities. And that's really what they want to see, that you have like a genuine interest and a passion for the thing that you're applying for, because you have to do it for 3 years. So if it's just to get a particular job at the end and your heart's not in it, you're going to really struggle. And I did see people that maybe chose English in a panic. They did maybe drop out because they realised it wasn't for them, and they ended up switching to other courses, and they were much happier. So it's really important, like it's quite a big decision. So just make sure it's the right thing for you, not because someone else has told you, if I had to give one main piece of advice. And for television, for the editorial side, it's like I said before, like you need to really love it. You need to, like, I love TV and film and I watch quite a lot of it. It's like my hobby. And that comes across when you're applying for jobs. And I guess when we say networking in a job, it's just doing a really good job. So you have the skills, you've come in, you've done the job really well, and people just remember you for that. So just being willing not to do anything, but just to be a team player, which is something that you probably do at school already and in your group projects, and you probably do at uni as well.
Well, I mean, coming to Exeter, if eventually that's the destination that you guys choose, I think Exeter is a land of opportunities. You know, the societies are so varied, and you know, I think my advice, like if you use those opportunities presented to you really effectively, then you know your career will I suppose will kind of set itself on its own path. You know, if we really utilize these opportunities available. And if I were to turn back time, I would definitely pick a mentor as soon as possible. And mentors change like over time. You know, I have one different mentor, and I was with another one that is like kind of more involved with you know, career decisions. And because these mentors, they are you know, influential people in their field, and they could, you know, you could really learn from their experience in the industry, to, you know, like how do we handle these things, and how do we answer if certain things you know, go south. And don't exhaust your mentor, obviously. You know, I think, you know, it had, you know, it's important to have like a kind of a healthy relationship going on without, you know, pulling them down too often, I suppose. And like, yeah, like Charlotte or Ryan here, you know, who are in visuals industry. Yeah, it's hard work. And I think my last piece of advice would be, you know, don't be lazy. And because a lot of people are. And then always stay driven, you know. I mean, just set your course on its path, and you'll get there eventually.
I would say don't be scared when you're at Exeter to experiment, and be open. It's really important, those two things. And it's very easy to say it, but much harder to do in practice when you're challenged. The whole point of being a university is to be challenged. And especially with drama, people have very set ways that they think they should do things. And drama is about opening up and taking risks with yourself and with the work. And that's a very hard thing to do. So it's not something I would necessarily encourage everyone to do or go into, not necessarily at degree level, but certainly after that. So that's what I would say about the degree. It can be enormous fun. And if you're not having fun, then there isn't much point in you doing it. So try and combine the two, be open, be experimental, take risks, but have fun. And then when you leave, only go into theatre if you absolutely cannot think of anything else you want to do. If it is absolutely the only thing you want to do. And it is very, very hard. And Dan will agree, he's nodding. And it's hugely amazing to be able to have the privilege to be able to make work. And I'm 50 this year and I'm still making work and I'm still on stage, which is amazing because many of my friends are not doing that anymore. And many people start and don't carry on, and that's not a bad thing. It doesn't, you're not measured by how long you have a career doing one thing at all. So don't feel sort of bad if you suddenly start off doing theatre and then change your mind. But my big tip, I guess, just practically is, and I'm sure you guys wouldn't do this, but I get people asking me for work and advice and things all the time. And I get a lot of emails and then they're never followed up and they're never sort of developed. And I usually try and answer them as best as I can, but generally have cups of tea with people if you can, rather than sending emails or expecting even them to be answered. So if you can get yourself in front of somebody and just say, could you just have half an hour? Could we have a cup of tea? Very few people are going to say no to that. So that would be what I would say.
I'd just say be mindful of the fact English is a really vast subject area, and you'll be allowed the freedom and flexibility, like other subjects represented here today as well, to specialise. So, but you don't need to think about what it is within English that you love right now before you start. Sometimes that will develop throughout your university career, and that's what happened for me. So yeah, I'd also really echo Charlotte's point about doing a year abroad. I did want to, if it's something you're interested in, definitely take up that opportunity. I didn't actually do a language, so I went to the Netherlands where they're very good at English, so I could get away with not speaking another language. Tried to pick up a bit of Dutch, but they're just too good at English. So even if you're not doing a language, just be aware that it's still potentially an opportunity for you to pick up. And Exeter has lots of great partnerships with universities across the world, even in places like the US and Australia. Yeah, and then for my career, I guess I'd just say stay up to date with current affairs as much as you can. Don't be afraid to have an opinion. Like lots of the roles I've worked in kind of require you, I guess, to be apolitical, but employers really appreciate you having your kind of own approach to things, your own voice, your own opinions. And yeah, and charities tend to be a bit of a network with people moving across charities. So once you're kind of in a charity job, it's really good to kind of just speak to people in other charities and get your name out there. And because sometimes they'll end up poaching you or approaching you with a promotion or another job. So yeah, that's kind of what I'd advise.
I'll try and be super concise because I'm going to echo lots of things that have been said anyway. I think making the most of the opportunities that you have, both within the course and school that you're in, but also around the campus with societies and events and conferences and things, that's really, really important. And that gives you that space to do the thing that Catherine was talking about earlier, which is take risks and try things out, and take this as the time to really experiment and try things out and try and make things happen. And that's potentially an unpopular view because that's risky, right? Especially when we're so focused on sort of driving for the best possible sort of results we can, and when all the sort of the numbers of it come in. But it's the time in your life when you'll have the most resource to be able to just experiment and try things out and find what you want to be doing, and to have people to support you, both academic staff and your peers. So yeah, to make the most of having those sorts of resources. And then in terms of working in theatre, go and see stuff, see stuff you don't want to see stuff you hate the idea of, see stuff and decide why you hate that, or be prepared to have that challenged. I think it's really, really important to be doing that. And to echo what was said earlier, it's really hard to turn down somebody saying, can I buy you a cup of coffee and talk about your work, rather than an email. Do that thing. Go and see something and then try and talk to the people afterwards. It's it's a good way to go about things.
Well, this comes very sadly to the end of our panel, but thank you all so much for being here today, and again, thank you so much for sharing your stories and just providing us with some fantastic tips and advice. We appreciate it so much. So thank you for being with us today. And to those of you who are watching, thank you so much for being here as well. We hope you've enjoyed yourselves. We hope you've picked up on some bits of advice. Oh, thank yous are coming in the comments. To our panelists, thank you so much for being here and for talking with us today. We appreciate it so much. So take care. Thank you all who've watched today, and goodbye for now. Thank you.